Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099 and I wanted to talk to you about a movie that I watched recently. Burn After Reading, directed by the Coen brothers. Also maybe written by the Coen brothers. I didn't look that up and I'm not going to take the time to look it up right now. So if it wasn't written by them, I will put a little caption here at the bottom of the screen saying if it was written by them or not. So, Burn After Reading is a very interesting movie. It is not a movie that I think I will ever watch again. It was mildly entertaining. I got into this movie thinking that it was going to be a wild, rambunctious comedy. It ended up being a little more subtle than that. There are some funny moments, but overall, I didn't come away from this laughing as much as I had hoped that I would. Now, part of that is just my expectations going into this movie. I've talked about this before, where I have certain expectations going into a movie or a book or a TV show, and when those expectations are not met, that's on me, that's not necessarily on the movie. In this case, I'm not entirely convinced that the Coen brothers were trying to make a wild, rambunctious comedy. I think they were trying to make a somewhat dark, satirical dramedy, I guess you could say. There are some funny moments. I just don't think they were trying to make something that would appeal to my comedic sensibilities. So, what is this movie about, you may be asking? That's a good question, and it's one that might take a little while to answer. We start with Osborne Cox. That's this guy right here, played by John Malkovich. He works for the CIA. He gets demoted at the beginning of the movie, and he doesn't like this. He doesn't take it very well, so he flat out quits. Osborne Cox is married to a shrew of a woman, played by Tilda Swinton. That's this woman right here. Tilda Swinton is sleeping with another guy, played by George Clooney. That's this guy right here. And George Clooney, he's also married to another woman who doesn't really factor into this movie. And he's sleeping with, by my count, 4 different people in this movie. There's Tilda Swinton, Osborne Cox's wife. There's his own wife. There's another woman that he sees at some point in the movie who doesn't really factor into this film. And then there's one of our other protagonists. I guess you could call her a protagonist slash antagonist. Linda Litzky. That's this woman right here. All of these people loosely tie into each other, but some of them don't really know that they tie into some of the others. The Osborne Cox, remember, that's this guy right here. Once he quits the CIA, his wife wants to get a divorce from him, but her divorce lawyer is saying, before you do that, let's try and figure out if you can gain complete control of your joint bank accounts. Now, I'm not entirely sure how this would work since I don't have a joint bank account with someone, but I feel like legally she would not be allowed to do this. But anyway, she does. So while Osborne Cox is out doing something, I don't even remember what he's doing, he comes back home, the locks have been changed on his door, all of his stuff is on the front porch, and he no longer has access to an account that at least is halfway full of his money. So that kind of puts him in a bit of a foul mood, understandably. Meanwhile, Tilda Swinton, that's this woman right here, she is wanting George Clooney, this guy right here, to divorce his own wife. He's a little skeptical. He wants to have his cake and eat it too. He doesn't want to divorce anyone. He wants to keep sleeping with as many people as he can. So eventually, Tilda Swinton gives all of the financial information on Osborne Cox to her divorce lawyer. He gives it to his secretary. She goes to a gymnasium and loses the CD. This gymnasium is where Linda Litzky and Brad Pitt work. Now, these two find this information, and it's all of this information about a CIA agent, and that's about all they know. They think that this is very sensitive, very classified information, and because of Brad Pitt's not especially intelligent demeanor, he says if we can return this, we might get a very high financial reward. Now, Linda Litzky, she wants to have 4 cosmetic surgeries done to herself to basically reinvent her body. And she's going to need a lot of capital to do this, so she is very attracted to the idea of basically blackmailing Osborne Cox to give him back this information. Of course, Osborne Cox does not know how they got this information, and eventually in the movie you find out there really is nothing valuable on this CD. Osborne Cox mentions earlier in the movie that since he's quit the CIA, he is going to write his memoirs, and that's basically the information that these two who work at the gymnasium have. They don't realize that the information they have is basically useless. And so the rest of the movie is basically hilarity ensuing, where various characters cross paths with each other. They don't necessarily know how they connect with these people, but they sort of connect with each other, and like I say, hilarity ensues. Just about any ensemble movie is going to be tricky because you don't really know which character to latch onto. With this movie, you spend the first 20 or so minutes with Osborne Cox, and I begin to feel really sorry for him. He gets fired for no real good reason at all, and his father is seemingly a vegetable. He's trying to connect with his father through a very superficial way because his father also worked for the CIA, and basically nothing goes right for this guy. Everyone is kind of running over him, and he doesn't really do anything to any of these people. Now, eventually, we kind of stop following Osborne Cox, and we start following George Clooney and Linda Litsky and kind of how their paths are intertwining. And then at the end of the movie, we start to see Osborne Cox a little bit more, and by this point, I don't really feel sorry for Osborne anymore because we've spent so much of the movie basically away from him, where we don't really get to see him do anything. And at this point, he's kind of a psychopath, and he kills somebody who does not deserve it at all, and I don't feel sorry for him anymore. But if you recall, I did feel sorry for him at the beginning of the movie. And I'm not entirely sure if that is all by design or if the filmmakers wanted me to feel sorry for Cox all the way through the movie. And then you've got a character like George Clooney. He's sleeping around with 4 different women. None of them know that he's sleeping around with 3 other women. So even though that is not an admirable quality at all, I still kind of feel sorry for him when, spoiler, he finds out that his wife wants a divorce from him. Ultimately, my 2 favorite characters in this movie are played by Brad Pitt and George Clooney. George Clooney is playing a little bit more subtle than Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is just straight up comic gold in this movie. He is hilarious. I had no idea that he was capable of that much hilarity. He is awesome in this movie. He doesn't really get a whole lot to do, though. I mean, he's in it, he does funny things, and then another spoiler, he gets taken out of the movie somewhat early into it. Maybe 3/4 of the way into the movie, you stop seeing him in the film, and he's not really playing as subtle as George Clooney is. George Clooney is not as funny as Brad Pitt, but he's a little bit more deep as a character is concerned. But those 2 are my favorite characters. Linda Litsky is by far my least favorite character. She's only concerned with how she looks. She doesn't really seem to care about anything other than becoming younger, looking younger, and she will do just about anything to do that, including turning Osborne Cox into a psychopath who will murder her boss for no real reason. I feel like if Linda Litsky was not in this movie, at least 2 people would not have died because of her actions. Overall, I feel like this movie is about people trying to find their ways to happiness. Various people in this movie are just trying to be happy, and sometimes that works out for them, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of these characters, their roads to happiness put them at cross purposes with other characters who want to be happy for an entirely different reason, and so they kind of become antagonists toward each other. And in a way, that's very realistic. In the real world, something that makes me happy might make someone else very angry or upset. So if I want to be happy, it might involve making someone else very unhappy. And that's a very real-world lesson to learn from this movie, even if this film is basically very farcical, and it delivers this message in a very satirical kind of way. I've also heard people say that this movie is about middle-aged people being stupid and not really making intelligent decisions. And while there is a fair amount of that in this movie, I don't think that's necessarily the theme. I think that's more something that has to happen narratively so that the rest of the story can happen. Why doesn't Osborne Cox call the police when Linda Litsky rear-ends him with her car? Well, it's because if he does that, then he doesn't go on the emotional rampage later in the movie that the plot needs him to do so that it can happen. Overall, this is a very fun movie to watch one time. I can't really see myself watching this again. It just doesn't have the number of one-liners and hilarious moments that you would think it would have for a comedy movie. But if you're wanting to go in for a somewhat comedic drama movie, sure, this is going to probably suit your taste just fine. I still am not entirely sure if you would want to watch the movie again after seeing it the one time. For me, I saw it, it was okay. I don't ever have to see it again. I don't mean that as an insult to the movie. It's just not something that I'm going to put back in the DVD player anytime even remotely soon. And so that's about all I have to say about this movie. What did you guys think of this movie? Did you like it? Dislike it? Let me know in the comments below. Did you like this video? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you did like this video, I encourage you to share, comment, and subscribe. Do all of the things that you love doing on YouTube videos. And I will be back tomorrow with a different kind of video. So until then, I'll catch you guys later. Have a great day.